Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relax Fantasy Review. Today, we're continuing our series in the brand new Player's Handbook, talking about what is, quite possibly, the most important choice you'll ever make when making your character. I am referring, of course, to your class. Yes, it is thematic and quite important. What species you belong to, what background you come from, how you manage your armor, your weapons, your spells. These are all important decisions, but so many of them are informed by the fact that your class is what's going to grow with you. As you level up through the game, it is your class decision that is going to define your party role, your powerful abilities that is going to define how you play the game in the first place. This is what your class is. And today we're talking about one of the most difficult classes to talk about, the Druid. A D&D Beyond survey or data mine that I saw a while ago said that the Druid was the least played class in D&D back in 2014 and so on. And I don't think that's because they're weak. Druids aren't weak. They actually have quite a bit of potency. The problem is that they're complicated. They are a high level of complexity when it comes to creating your character and managing all of the things that you can do as a druid. There is some room for optimization, but they aren't the high power class, nor are they the simple class. They fit into this weird middle ground. And that means that a lot of people just are turned off by them because they think that there's other classes that can do better or that fit their mold better. But the Druid fits such an important niche. The nature caster, the master of magic in the natural world. And I think that the changes that have been made in 2024 are an effort to balance the Druid out, making them simpler and less power creepy. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. But before we do, I'd like to let you know, Relax Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can support me here on YouTube and get a couple benefits. First, you get a little badge next to your name in the comments, letting folks know that you're a supporter. But also you get early access to my videos. I upload videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I upload them a day early for members only. If that interests you, you can click the join button. It's just down there next to the subscribe button. I'd love to see you in the comments with your member badge. And if it doesn't interest you, that's totally fine too. Just watching the video at all, liking, subscribing, being part of the community as it grows is an important thing to me, and it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm and all that fun stuff. So thank you for watching my content and supporting me here on YouTube. So Druids, let's talk level 1, the basics of the Druid class. Druids get a hit die of a D8. The D8 hit die is pretty standard nowadays. You're not as tanky as a fighter, you're not as squishy as a wizard. You know, it works. It means that you're not going to be a frontliner, but it does mean that you have a little bit of survivability, so I give it 8 out of 10. You are proficient in intelligence and wisdom saving throws. Wisdom saves are possibly the most common saves in the whole game. Lots of effects force a wisdom save. Intelligence is far more niche, doesn't come up very often. When it does, it is insanely important that you make that save, because most of the time they are really bad effects that you'd like to avoid. I give them 7 out of 10 and 10 out of 10 respectively. Your skill proficiencies, you get 2 out of a list of 8. Lots of choices here. Your classic druid stuff, nature, animal handling, insight is all here. You aren't a skill build. You've only got 2 options to kind of, have for your own. But they're thematic and they make sense, and I like skills, so I'm giving this 8 out of 10. The base druid gets simple weapon proficiency only. No fancy weapons here. You're talking clubs and quarterstaffs, daggers, crossbows, the simple-based things. You're going to have options, no matter if you want to go into strength or dex, dual-wielding, range. There's even a 2-handed weapon if you want the great club. So you're not strapped here, but you're not going to get any of the big fancy weapons, which everybody loves. It's a shame, and I think that that's a 7 out of 10. Not functionally defunct, just not great. What is great is that you get proficiency with a tool. And this is something that is most classes don't have. And the proficiency is with the herbalism kit. Now, I used to think herbalism kits were niche, very, very situational, dependent on what your DM said. Not anymore. The player's handbook is incredibly specific that when you are proficient with herbalism kits, you can craft healing potions. Yeah, just standard 2d4 plus 2 potions of healing, the adventurer's gear. This is absolutely insane, especially in the early game. If you're willing to put the resources into gathering the herbs, getting all the stuff you need, and as a druid, that shouldn't be too hard, and then spending the time making the potions, you are handing out, on average, 7 points of healing with a bonus action to your party members, and you can just stockpile these. Obviously, if you need to buy your resources, you're not going to have infinite healing potions. But considering that at level 1, a druid with a constitution of 14 is going to have 10 hit points, and a healing potion heals on average of 7, 1 healing potion per party member, and you have almost doubled their longevity. I think that this is a fantastic tool, and the fact that druids just get it straight away at level 1, 10 out of 10. And then Wizards of the Coast have done something interesting with druids. They've taken away their medium armor proficiency. Now you're proficient in light armor and shields. Usually it was medium armor and shields that were kind of tied together. Light was its own thing and heavy was its own thing, and medium and shields kind of existed in the middle. That's not the case anymore. Now light armor is more associated with shield use, and medium armor is its own thing, and druids don't have it. Now, in the old days, druids couldn't use most medium armor anyway, because there was that rule that druids wouldn't wear metal armor. And, I don't know, that was a weird thing. I don't like to get into the details, because I usually hand-waved it myself anyway. But assuming you were played rules as written, that meant that hide armor was the only medium you could wear anywho. And if you had a dex of 16, studded leather was better than hide armor. Now that isn't a thing. It's just light and shield. So the tanky druid builds, if you ignored the metal armor restriction, aren't as much of a thing because you just get light and shield. So studded leather, 14 dex with a shield. Now your AC is 16. That's decent, but it's certainly not tanky. I think that it's still 8 out of 10. Like, you've still got armor, and having shields is a big deal. Having a shield proficiency is massive when you want to defend yourself. And unless you're using two-handed weapons, there's no reason not to. Spellcasters can carry shields, even when they're casting with their focuses. So, I'm going to say 8 out of 10 for armor proficiencies. Now, of course, druids are one of the 6 primary casters in the game. They are the wisdom-based full caster that isn't the cleric. And druids certainly have a lot in common with their cleric brethren. They've got a list of how many spells they can prepare. It's on their table. But when they take their long rest, they can change them out for any spell in the entire druid list. So you're never without a specific spell because you picked it and now you're locked in. One long rest and you can change it all up. The number of spells you can prepare is pretty good, pretty sizable. And the druid spell list is okay. There's a lot of utility, a lot of battlefield control, not a whole lot of damage, but when you play into your battlefield control, you can utilize the damage you have. You're also pretty limited on cantrips. You only get 2 at level 1, which is a little bit odd. So, you got to pick really carefully. But, you're a full spellcaster that can pick your entire spell list with a long rest. And you're a wisdom-based caster. So some of those key skills like survival and perception and insight are going to get boosted because you're just leaning heavily into your magic. Druid spellcasting is one of my favorites in the game, and I give it 10 out of 10. You also get the secret language of the druids, the feature Druidic, which lets you leave messages in nature places, using sticks and leaves and twigs and rocks and who the heck knows what else. It takes creatures an investigation check to solve it, unless you also speak Druidic, so mostly it's druids that'll see it. This used to be just a very niche storytelling feature, but it actually added something. Now you always have Speak with Animals prepared, which is cool. I think it's cool that at level 1, all druids can always cast Speak with Animals, yeah, that's just handy. And I think that it's a powerful ability that is going to come in handy more often than the druidic leaving messages thing. I think it's worthy of a 7 out of 10. It's still not super powerful, but it's better than it used to be. And then finally, you get the feature Primal Order. This is something, again, similar to the Cleric, where you get to choose which kind of druid you want to be. Where do you want to lean? More into your combat effectiveness or more into your magic and your skill effectiveness? If you choose that defender one where you, protector thing where you are buffing up your combat powers, you get proficiency in martial weapons, so that instantly gives you all the weapons you want, and medium armor. No heavy armor for the druids. But medium armor with no metal restriction is fine. Scale mail, plus 14 dex plus shield, that's an 18 AC. And if you can get, breastplate or half plate, and yeah, there is a way to make a tanky druid if you take this option of Primal Order. The other option is the spellcasting one, and it grants you an extra druid cantrip. As I mentioned earlier, druids only get 2, so honestly, getting a third is pretty awesome. There's some good options in here, and the fact that you only get 2 is kind of a shame. So yeah, I'll take that third one, thank you. Also, whenever you make Arcana or Nature checks, which are normally intelligence-based skill checks, you can add your Wisdom modifier to them. This is good. I used to think it was very odd that a wisdom-based caster like a druid had to invest in their intelligence to be good at the nature skill. That didn't make sense to me. So it's nice that you're adding wisdom to it, but you have to pick this magician style Primal Order, which robs you of medium armor. Of course, it's okay if you're trying to be a primary caster. Your armor's not as important to you anyway. But if you're trying to be a martial combatant, then your skill proficiency that you're missing out on, plus the extra cantrip, it's a weird decision that you have to make. And honestly, it's a meaningful decision. I don't actually begrudge this. I think that this is a solid option where either one can work. This is a 50-50 split for me. Like with the clerics, I mentioned that I'm going to take the defender version 9 out of 10 times because I'd rather have heavy armor. But this isn't heavy, this is medium armor. And martial weapons, sure, they're nice. But honestly, this is not as clear-cut of an option for me. I'm not only taking the magic one in rare cases. It's about 50-50, depending on which variety of druid I want. And that makes it a good feature in my eyes. 9 out of 10 for Primal Order. Let's move on to level 2. Level 2 druids get their classic feature, Wild Shape. And Wild Shape has changed quite a bit in the mechanics. The theme is still the same. You can transform into animal forms, but exactly how that works is very different. You can transform into Wild Shape, a few times per day. You get 2 straight away, and then you can get 1 back on a short rest, and they all recharge on a long rest. When you do so, it takes a bonus action, not an action, so any druid can Wild Shape at the beginning of combat without it seriously affecting what they're doing. And you can bonus action shift back if you wish to. When you Wild Shape, you have to choose one of 4 different forms. At level 2, you get to choose 4 forms. The book even recommends Spider and Rat for, infiltration and utility purposes. Riding Horse, so you've got some extra speed and battlefield maneuverability. Or just Wolf, because the creatures have to be CR1/4 or lower. When you transform into the animal, you no longer get its full health bar like you used to. Instead, you just get a number of temporary hit points equal to your druid level, which isn't that many. At this level, that's 2. So it's not a whole lot of health boost. But when you lose those temporary hit points, you don't drop out of your Wild Shape. You stay in your Wild Shape until you either run out of time. The time is, a number of hours equal to half your druid level, so it's an hour now, and it goes up over time. And you only drop out if you become incapacitated, if you don't run out of time, or die. So, yeah, you go through your entire druid health bar, your normal health, your normal HP, and stay in Wild Shape as long as you want to. The upside to this, of course, is that you get all the proficiencies and all the abilities and the mental stats of, sorry, the physical stats of the creature, but you keep your own mental stats. You also keep your memories, your personality, and interestingly enough, the ability to speak. No need for the telepath feat now. You can just talk while you are a spider, which is honestly kind of creepy, but it's nice. It means that you don't have to mess around with, like, beast languages, speak with animals, or telepathy to talk to your party. You can just talk. One thing you can't do, though, is cast your spells. While you're in animal form, unless your subclass very specifically says so, you cannot cast spells while you are wild-shaped. The typical Druid play, if they want to do wild shape, is they'll cast a concentration spell, usually that takes their action, leave it on the battlefield while they're concentrating, and then shift into wild shape as a bonus action. This means that they've got a magic spell on the field, and they're controlling it with their concentration. They just can't cast another one. And since it only takes a bonus action to shift back out of wild shape, if you lose your concentration and it's pivotal that you get that spell back, you can just bonus action go out of wild shape, turn back into a person, and action cast your spell. It's not as clunky as it used to be. But, no cantrips for you while you're in wild shape. Now, what's interesting about the wild shape as well is that it used to be that you get all the hit points of the creature, and that this would scale over time because you would get higher CRs. At level 2, you can do CR 1/4, and you get, you can't have a flying speed, and you can know 4 forms. And then as you level up, it goes up to CR 1/2 at level 4, and you can know more forms, still no flying. And then at level 8, you can be CR1 creatures. That's the bear that everyone wants to talk about, or the giant eagle. And yes, you can have flying speeds. So level 8 is when it really takes off. Literally, if you're an eagle. So it does scale over time. And of course, you aren't grabbing all the hit points from the wild form anymore. Because it used to be you'd transform into a bear and suddenly you've got loads of extra hit points and a nice powerful multi-attack. It's not the case anymore. Now, any creature that you shift into gets the same temp HP boost. This is a nice equalizer move. The big tanky forms aren't always going to be the answer anymore. They used to be like the default. Everyone would shift into either a creature with loads of hit points, and only the creatures that had, the utility-based creatures were afterthoughts because they weren't tanky and they weren't as effective in combat. Now it doesn't matter. Everything is as tanky as each other. And it is their powers, their attacks, their utility, their special effects, that's what matter the most. And I think that's what it was supposed to be when we talked about Wild Shape all those years ago. Now, of course, there are some benefits still to being a big tanky form, better armor class, potentially, as well as, multi-attack, strong attacks, cool. But I still think that there is something to be said for, getting the same amount of tankiness, as far as hit points go, from a small form as a big form. Wild Shape is still one of the best features in the whole game. It solves any utility problem basically by just knowing the right form to be. Works in combat, works out of combat, you can use it a few times per day. The forms scale at least up to level 8, and eventually you can fly with this. All is well with Wild Shape. It hasn't been nerfed into the ground. The tanks aren't as powerful, but the smaller utility forms are much more viable. It's balanced, and I love what Wizards of the Coast have done. I think it's worth 10 out of 10 still to this day. And on top of that, the Wild Companion feature, the other thing you get at level 2, is here, and you can use a charge of your Wild Shape to summon a familiar, cast Find Familiar. The familiar lasts until the end of the day, so until you long rest, which is honestly better than it used to be. It used to have a time limit on it, now it doesn't, and it's just end of the day. And this is worth using a Wild Shape charge on. Like, I would use this at the beginning of the day, short rest, get that charge back. Now you've still got 2 Wild Shapes and a familiar with you. Find Familiar is an incredibly powerful spell, potent for utility, good in combat. All in all, Wild Companion, I'm giving 9 out of 10. Now, we're going to skip over level 3 and 4. That's when you're talking subclasses and feats, and we're not going to cover those in this video. Instead, we're going to go straight to level 5, Wild Resurgence. And this is where things go crazy mode. Because Wild Resurgence states, once per turn, if you do not have any uses of Wild Shape, you can use a spell slot to get one back. So now you're never out of Wild Shapes. And any spell slot, it can be a first level spell, second level spell, it doesn't matter. Any spell slot you like, you can just give yourself a Wild Shape, and that is awesome. That is super, super strong. Alternatively, if you're really leaning into your spell casting and you don't want to use your Wild Shapes for much, you can, once per day, utilize a Wild Shape to give yourself a first level spell slot back. So it's just an extra spell slot that's in your tank. I think that neither of these take an action, by the way. It's just no action required. Boop, you have the thing. If you start a turn not in Wild Shape and you have no uses left, there's no action. Take one of your first level spell slots, get a Wild Shape, bonus action Wild Shape. There you go. It was as if you had it the whole time. I think this ability to swap back and forth, I mean, obviously, if you could just interchange them at will, and there was no limitation on Wild Shape to spell slot, that'd be cool. But as it stands, it still takes Wild Shape and takes it from a limited resource to a almost unlimited resource. Like, if you really want to turn into an animal multiple times, just throw a few first level spell slots at it. You'll be fine. I give this 10 out of 10. Now level 7 comes along, and we're talking Elemental Fury. This is the ability that, once again, you're going to choose between your combat efficacy and your spell casting. You have a choice. Either you take potent spell casting, where you add your wisdom modifier to your cantrip damage. This just makes your cantrips way more reliable sources of damage, since it's not just the dice anymore. Alternatively, you can take the Nature Strikes power, where you, when you attack with a weapon, or when you attack in an animal form, so this happens regardless of whether you're rat, beasts, bear, spider, or druid with a sword or club, doesn't matter. You're dealing an extra d8 once per turn of elemental-based damage. So we're talking fire, cold, lightning, all the classics. This is nice. I mean, you're either adding a few points to cantrips, or you're adding a few points to a weapon strike, and this is good. And because it works with Wild Shape forms as well, it doesn't matter what kind of druid you are. There's an option here for you. Now, the buff isn't huge, like it's not a lot of damage, but it's some reliability. It's some extra punch to your druid, and I think that it's worthy of an 8 out of 10 at least. Now, we don't get any more class features all the way up to level 15 when we get improved Elemental Fury. And this one is even more crazy, because your Nature Strikes, which do the extra elemental damage, do get buffed here, so they do 2d8 instead of 1d8. Is level 15 a little late for that? Maybe, but it's certainly welcome. Now you're doing, more elemental damage, and you choose the damage, which is cool, and it works with your beast forms, so awesome. The other thing that you can choose if you're leaning into the spell casting is that your cantrips suddenly become way more ranged. What it says is that if you cast a cantrip that has a range of 10 feet or longer, it suddenly has a range of 300 feet. Now, you gotta look at the Druid's list to understand how impactful this is, but this means that spells like Thorn Whip, Starry Wisp, even things like Elementalism and Druidcraft, all of a sudden can be cast from hundreds of feet away. Excuse me? Thorn Whip normally has a range of 30 feet. You hit someone with it and pull them 10 feet towards you. Now you can hit someone 300 feet away and pull them 10 feet towards you. They can be standing on the other end of a crevasse, and you just grab them with a Thorn Whip and yank them into it, even though you're nowhere near them. Invisible enemies that are flying in the sky, you can start firing your Starry Wisp bolts up at them. And even things that aren't combat focused. Like I said, Druidcraft and Elementalism has a range of 30 feet. Now they have a range of 300 feet. Heck, even Poison Spray, which has been buffed, by the way. Now it's an attack roll rather than a saving throw based cantrip. You can just shoot poison at creatures hundreds of feet from you. This is nuts. Now, obviously, it's just cantrips, and most of the time, you're not going to be that far away when you cast your spells, but the fact that you can, the fact that it's an option now, you aren't limited to being on the same map, the same battle map as a creature. They can be a long way away, and you can still do this. Wow. I mean, it's just fun. Like, it's not super powerful. It's just really fun and handy. You combine that with the option of doing extra elemental damage if you've leaned into that theme, and I'm giving Improved Elemental Fury a 9 out of 10. It definitely is a good boost from the old one. Now, level 18, you get the power known as Beast Spells. And this one is exactly what it says on the tin. Now that you're level 18, you can cast your spells while in wild shape. They just can't have material components, that are consumed or that you need to hold or something like that. And yeah, it's interesting that now you can just... It doesn't matter whether you've leaned heavy into your wild shape and your elemental strikes, or you've leaned heavy into your spell casting. Now they just kind of come back together, where the roads all lead to the same place. In level 18, you've got your 9th level spells now, assuming you haven't multi-classed. I guess you wouldn't have if you made it to level 18 Druid. So yeah, you can be a beast and just cast an 8th or 9th level spell. And that's kind of badass. And, you still got all the temp HP and the powers of the wild shape form. It's all still here. And yeah, I can't complain about this. This is just exactly what I wanted. Now, I wanted it 10 levels earlier. But honestly, if you've stuck with Druid this long, it's a great feeling to be able to do this. I'm giving this 10 out of 10 because it just takes all the things you were doing as one Druid, one type of Druid or another type of Druid, and says, congratulations, you can do both now. Awesome. Finally, the capstone feature for Druids, Archdruid, level 20. This gives you a couple ribbon features. You don't age as fast. Cool. When you roll initiative, if you have no wild shapes, you get one back. Sure, cool. You've been able to make wild shapes out of spell slots since level 5 anyway. The really powerful feature here is that when you transform your wild shape into spells, like you've been doing since level 5, now it gets a massive buff. Now, if you turn a wild shape into a spell, the spell slot you get from it is 2 times the number of wild shapes you use. You can use multiple of them now. Rather than just getting a 1st level spell slot back, now you get a 2nd level spell slot back if you use 1 wild shape, a 4th if you use 2, and then if you have 3 or 4 uses of wild shape in the bank, which again, you can get multiple because you can turn your spell slots into wild shapes. Now you can create an 8th level spell slot once per day with this feature. An 8th level spell slot with your wild shapes? I mean, really, you're just using a few low-level spell slots, turning them into wild shapes, and then turning all of that into one big 8th level spell. That's insane. If you told a wizard, give me all of your 1st level spell slots, all 4 of them, and I'll give you 1 extra 8th level spell slot a day, you have any idea how popular that would be? No one would say no to that. An 8th level spell slot is huge. It's a world ender. It's an army ender. It's a combat ender. It's a massively powerful thing to have. The fact that you only get 1 per day. I mean, hell, let me put it this way. There's an epic boon, the epic boon of high magic, which gives you an extra 9th level spell slot once a day. This is just something that you get for being a level 20 druid. You can sacrifice some low-level magic and give yourself an 8th level spell slot once per day. And it doesn't even take an epic boon. If you took the epic boon of high magic at level 19, now you're going to have, if you sacrifice a bit of lower-level magic, an extra 8th and 9th level spell slot? What? That's wild. That takes the whole other features of Archdruid and blows them out of the water. This is really strong. Like, I cannot explain exactly how powerful high-level magic can be. There's a reason you're only supposed to have 1 slot every day, even at level 20. So Archdruid just says, nah, man, I'm going to have an extra one. That's 10 out of 10, and it's so good. It is well worth getting the level 20 Druid if you ever have the chance, just so you can do this twice instead of once. Wow. And that's it. That's the Druid. They are still complicated. They still have the choices of wild shapes. They've still got the mechanics of being an animal. But other than that, I like what they've done here. It's still good. They have streamlined the health issue. They have made it better to be more thematic, smaller creatures rather than just big and tanky ones. That's awesome. It's not like every druid's going to be a bear now. And they've made it so that no matter which path you choose, magic, combat, wild shape, they go on their separate paths, but they all kind of come back together at the end. And all of them are valid. None of them are inherently weaker than the others. Now, granted, we haven't seen the monster manual yet, so we don't know exactly what our options will be. But everything I've heard from the internet spaces have said that monsters are going to get buffed. And if that's the truth, it means the druids are going to get buffed as well, especially if they buff their, saving throws or their attacks or their special effects. So yeah, I'm confident that the druid is going to still be a powerful class to play, and with the simplified route that Wild Shape has now taken, where most creatures end up giving you the same level of tankiness, and it is their powers that matter more, that is good. That is going to imply that more people can just pick their favorite animals and roll with it, and it's probably going to work. I think Druid has been opened up and has been given a lot of things that will take it out of that least played zone. Will that be the Ranger now? Who knows? In any case, I'm giving the Druid 9 out of 10. A solid class, very strong. I like the changes, and I know a lot of people online are saying that the Druid is dead. I don't think it could be further from the truth. I think they are more alive now than ever. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more class reviews coming down the line soon. Have a good one, my friends.